Apple reporting results overnight, posting a record profit of revenue, I should say profit and revenue. Shares are higher in the pre-market this morning. Joining us right now is Gene Munster. He is Loop Ventures managing partner. And Gene, we talked about it in the past hour already. I mean, pretty much beat on every metric. I was surprised, happily, I think we all were, on the Mac side. I think that's just such a standout number. Nobody was focused on that. The iPad piece was probably the only disappointment. And then the question is, if we didn't have these supply constraints, where would we really even be?
Yeah, that can triangulate that. Where we'd be is we'd probably have 18% revenue growth in the just reported December quarter. They reported 11. It would have been about 7% higher. The guidance, if you kind of back into it, implies a 3% increase from where the street was at. They probably would have guided up around 10%. If not for the continued FX headwind or the continued supply chain headwind along with the FX. So that's just kind of normalizing it there. But I want to kind of jump back to a bigger picture here just to try to put some perspective around this quarter. I've seen a lot of Apple quarters. I've seen many countless impressive quarters. They all kind of just blur together at some level. There is a recency bias I want to try to guard against when I say this, but this was a particularly memorable quarter, just given the strength that we just outlined, those headwinds. It wasn't just supply chain. You've got ships parked outside a port. You have workers that weren't working from corporate. You've got, obviously, the pandemic. You've got a spike in logistics costs. It was multi-layered, and they just, with the exception of the iPad, as you said, they just crushed it. And I'll remember this one.
Do you re-rate this stock as a result? I mean, we're sort of in this sort of re-rating period where all the growth stuff's already coming off. I don't know if you think of this as a growth stock, a value stock at this point, given where it's at relative to the others. What's the take?
The take is that the environment is not very supportive of these tech companies. That's pretty obvious here. It's just a high bar. If you would put a typical beat like this, all the context together, and just say, let's take away the noise around the Fed, I would expect the stock would be up 10% today, and it's not even going to be close to up that much. And so there is a dynamic in the near term, which is, I think, clouding the significance of the strength that they have. Ultimately, fundamentals are going to win, and cash flow is going to win, and I suspect that this cloud will too pass around the broader market, and investors are going to look back and re-rate these higher. And here's, I think, probably the boldest of my predictions is that ultimately, I think that the multiple expands on Apple. I think that they get the credit for continuing to deliver hardware that operates as performance like a software business. And separately, I think some of these other markets that they're getting into, they hinted around augmented reality, metaverse, and potentially car. I think that does expand the multiple. Put it all together, I still think this is a $250 stock in the next couple of years.